Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm taking you to the Spring Cup, where I'm going to be showcasing a team created by Rise to Occasion that I tried today and had really positive results with. Now this team is all built around Shadow Victreebel as the safe switch. Shadow Victreebel is one of the best Pokemon in this meta. With Acid, Leaf Blade, and Sludge Bomb, not only does it have incredibly fast pacing, but due to Victreebel's insane attack stat, it's able to output some truly ludicrous amounts of damage. This team features Jellicent as the lead, the aforementioned Victreebel as the safe switch, and Gourgeist as the closer. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game number 1, we pick up a terrible lead, leading Jellicent into Go-Go. I immediately safe switch into Shadow Victreebel, and my opponent responds with the new Calm Day Tinkaton. Now Tinkaton did get a very big boost, with its Calm Day getting access to Gigaton Hammer. However, even with Gigaton Hammer, Shadow Victreebel's pacing is just so relentless that even though it is throwing entirely resistant damage, Shadow Victreebel can just simply win the twos. I'm able to farm up a ton of energy, and now I'm already at back-to-back Leaf Blades. First Leaf Blade is going to connect onto Tinkaton, and I fire off Leaf Blade number 2, winning charge attack priority. Now, if my opponent wants switch advantage, they're going to have to give up a shield, but I'm just going to double shield, fully acid down, and they're going to be in a very tough spot. My opponent actually pivots out. They reveal their final Pokemon is going to be their own Jellicent, and at this point, this game is over. I fire off the Leaf Blade, pressuring the shield, and now I can switch my Jellicent into theirs. I'm down quite a lot of energy, but in the Jellicent mirror, you do not get one-shot by a Shadow Ball, and that is what's going to win me this game. My Jellicent survives the Shadow Ball, I get a Shadow Ball of my own, that sets up a Hex Farm down, and at this point, my opponent's fate is sealed. In comes Go-Go. Go-Go does get an energy head start, just to meet a brick wall in Gourgeist. 2 Rock Slides are not going to be enough to secure the knockout onto Gourgeist. Rock Slide number 1 is going to land, opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. Hopping into game number 2, we pick up a very scary lead Jellicent into Shadow Victreebel. I tried playing out Victreebel lead several different ways, and the only way that ended up providing success was just staying in the lead with Jellicent, no shielding the Leaf Blade, and then firing off the Shadow Ball. Jellicent wins the zeros against Victreebel. Outside of the zeros, you're going to end up losing that matchup. So, after getting a shield advantage, I safe switch into my own Victreebel as my opponent safe switches their own Jellicent. So now, the roles are reversed. If my opponent goes for a Surf, they should be able to make double Surf, and even a resisted Surf does quite a lot of damage. My opponent makes a pretty big misplay. They go for the Shadow Ball, they're unable to make a second move, and now I have a Shadow Victreebel that's very healthy and has a massive amount of energy. This energy is so strong in the meta that my opponent, it doesn't really matter what they have in the back, this game is already over. They send in Klefki. Now Klefki is fully resisting everything that Victreebel throws. So surely Victreebel won't be able to take the knockout, right? Well, Victreebel is going to come very, very close. I actually end up missing a bubble on one of those Leaf Blades, so I barely missed the KO. But it's going to be Victreebel met with the Gourgeist. Victreebel can make the Sludge Bomb, but I know that I can barely hang on here. It's not going to be by much. Victreebel's damage output is just absurd, but I'm able to withstand the damage, make the Shadow Ball, knock out the Klefki, and take the win. We move to game number 3. Jellicent is going to be greeted with a Klefki this time on the lead, and this is an awkward Pokemon for this team to deal with. Since this team is ABA Ghost, opposing Astonish users or Sucker Punch users like Grimmsnarl are going to be a pretty big issue. However, what I've found really nice about Jellicent in the lead is Jellicent wins so many Zero Shield matchups. Like here against Klefki, as long as you have a good Jellicent, Jellicent can survive the Astonishes and the Foul Play and make double Surf and win either Switch Advantage or Shield Advantage. Klefki ends up no shielding, they send in Hisuian Samurott, and I do not want to give any kind of energy advantage to the Samurott, so I immediately send in Victreebel. Have to respect the potential Icy Wind. My opponent does bait with the Sacred Sword. I'll farm up massively, go for the Leaf Blade, and they make a nice catch onto Hisuian Electrode. Leaf Blade is resisted here, but unfortunately, what's not resisted is the Acids. The Acids do so much damage that now this resisted Leaf Blade will be able to secure the KO. So I fire off the Leaf Blade, shield does come up, I'm able to make a Leaf Blade number 2, the pacing on Victreebel is just absolutely relentless. Leaf Blade will take the knockout, back in comes the Samurott. Samurott gonna look for a farm down, but they're not gonna get it. I don't have the greatest Victreebel ever. It's only 1480 combat power, but it's able to hang on and make the last second Leaf Blade, and now I just send in the Gourgeist. Icy Wind will be super effective, but I can survive it. But Disaster strikes, they have a Dark Pulse, but thank goodness I have a bulky Gourgeist. We barely hang on to make the Seed Bomb. That was almost a complete nightmare, but luckily Gourgeist had just enough bulk to make the Seed Bomb and take the win. We pick up a bit of a tricky lead in the next match, Jellicent into Gourgeist. Gourgeist can actually win the 2-shield here if they play their cards right. Gourgeist will fire off a charge attack as soon as they get there. I put up the shield just for it to be a seed bomb, and I'm immediately answered with a Tentacruel safe switch. Tentacruel is a bit awkward for my backline, but then again, so is Gourgeist. My Victreebel so far does not have a lot of play against their team. However, the good news for me is that my Jellicent should still be outside of payback range, and that is very important, because if payback takes the knockout here, I'm in quite a lot of trouble, but I have a very bulky Jellicent. For this team, as bulky of a Jellicent as possible is going to be preferred. I'm barely able to hang on and take the knockout. The moment my opponent sends in Gourgeist, I'm bringing in my own. I cannot afford to let them get an energy head start because I'm very weak to Gourgeist in the back. I put up the shield, Gourgeist goes for the seed bomb bait. I'm going to try for the farm down. They live on 1 HP, but I win charge attack priority. My opponent can now not shield this move because if they shield, they're going to get KO'd through the shield and its Lantern in the back. That is a fun mechanic that not a lot of trainers know about. A shielded charge attack does not do 0 damage. It does exactly 1 damage. So right there, my opponent was at 1 HP. It was a CMP tie. They shielded for the move, but unfortunately, they got knocked out because a shielded charge attack does 1 hit point of damage. Either way, with the Lantern in the back, we were going to be in a really good spot, and we're able to take the win. Picking up a very nice lead in the next match, Jellicent into Togekiss. My opponent safe switches into an Astonish Mawile, and I stay in to fire off the Shadow Ball. Mawile is typically going to be on Vice Grip and Power Up Punch, which means that even though they're hitting for super effective damage with the Astonish, I wall their energy. But this one actually has Iron Head, and that is a very big problem for me. I had not yet seen an Iron Head Mawile, and that is going to cost me my entire Gourgeist. I felt like I had a pretty well laid out plan, and unfortunately, it kind of all went awry. But the good news is I actually walled them with Jellicent, so I'm able to send in the Jellicent, tank the Vice Grip no problem, and my opponent pivots back into the Togekiss. Togekiss will get shredded by Shadow Ball, they put up the final shield, and now I have to send in the Shadow Victreebel. My opponent should be at the back-to-back Psyshock, so I will put up the shield, and then immediately fire off the Leaf Blade. This covers for them trying to go for the CMP tie, but they don't. They don't fire off their charge stack, and Leaf Blade will secure the knockout. So I have a Victreebel, and in the back, they have a Jellicent. I'm just going to keep farming and watch for a catch. They do not get the catch, and that is going to be the game winner. I'm at back-to-back Leaf Blades. Jellicent does survive a Leaf Blade, but I have a second one loaded. But we're going to take the easy way out here. We just send in Jellicent, get the Hex down, and take the win. Hopping into the next match, leading Jellicent into Shadow Mawile. The Astonish users were definitely out today. My opponent pivots out of that matchup, and they save switch into Tenta. That Mawile could be a bit of a problem in the endgame, and Jellicent overall does pretty okay into Tentacruel just because the payback doesn't one-shot, but my opponent putting up an early shield means I feel very comfortable not shielding myself. And it gets even better. I end up calling a Scald Bait. I was fine just taking the payback damage, to be honest, but now that my opponent ended up going for a bait and it backfired, I feel very comfortable shielding up the Jellicent. Because I'm going to get a lot of value out of this Jellicent. My opponent's not going to make it to a second charge stack. They pivot back into the Mawile, and it's actually a Fire Fang Mawile. In my eyes, this is not the move to run in this meta. You definitely need to run Astonish. I'm going to farm up, pivot into Gourgeist, and get the catch and sneak. And that should probably just be game over. It's a double resisted Vice Grip. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We move to the next game, and whoa, that is a blast from the past, leading Jellicent into Whiscash. I'm more than happy to stay in this matchup. My opponent save switches into a Razor Leaf Shadow Victreebel, and this is unfortunately a good demonstration of what not to do with Victreebel. Victreebel with Razor Leaf is terrible in this meta. Victreebel with Razor Leaf is hard wins or hard loses, whereas Victreebel with Acid is very flexible. Even in its bad matchups, Acid Victreebel is still able to hit back for monstrous damage. Whereas my opponent save switch to Razor Leafer, I one shield farm down, they bring in a Charmed Togekiss, they get one shot by a Sludge Bomb, and they are just getting fully 1v3'd by Victreebel. At this point, I was just in shock at what my opponent was running and the fact that they hadn't top lefted, so I decided to have a little fun with it. We're at the back-to-back Leaf Blades, but I decide, you know what, we're gonna go for the Sludge Bomb. My opponent's running like some toxic fast move pressure heavy stuff, so we'll go for the bad manners there, throwing a Sludge Bomb where it's resisted onto the Whiscash. Whiscash is going to secure the knockout, but I can just send back in the Jellicent. My opponent playing it out to the bitter end. They end up going on alignment as well. This was like in the 2800s, so I was very surprised to see this kind of a team in the 2800s. Victreebel does not want Razor Leaf in this meta. We saw it just got dismantled and set up my Victreebel to fully sweep their team. Well, that's probably the only time we're going to see a team like that, so we'll just move to the next match, and we pick up a very nice lead Jellicent into Seaking. Seaking throws a Peck, they safe switch into Klefki. Now, I never really want to send in the Gourgeist into Klefki just because Klefki has access to super effective foul play. So more often than not, I just like to stay in the matchup and play it out. I know that I do win the zeros, but in doing so, by staying in, I've now set my opponent up to where they can just no-shield this, and then they're probably going to end up sweeping me with the Seaking. So in hindsight, I definitely should have saved the Jellicent. Normally, I don't like to pivot out in situations like that, but I think if it's a Seaking on the lead in particular, I have to pivot out. Because if I don't, I'm just going to get completely overrun by the Seaking. Seaking will fire off the Icy Wind, I put up the shield, I have to throw right away to outpace, and they get the catch and sneak onto Amoonguss. I had a feeling that catch was coming, and unfortunately there wasn't really anything that I can do about it. My opponent just had a team that was very, very strong into mine. Double Astonish, we can't really do anything with Double Ghost, so we will concede the match. And unfortunately, the Amoongusses continue in the next match as I lead Jellicent into Amoonguss. I safe switch into the Shadow Victreebel, that's going to be answered with the Seaking, but Seaking is honestly not the greatest answer to a Victreebel up energy, as Victreebel should be guaranteed to force shield advantage or switch advantage. I put up the shield as they go for the Icy Wind, I overfarm slightly, and then fire off Leaf Blade number 2. Is my opponent willing to give me their final shield? No, Seaking gets KO'd. Back in comes Amoonguss. Amoonguss looking for a farm down that they're simply not going to get. Victreebel hangs on, makes the Sludge Bomb, that is debuffed and still does monster damage onto the Amoonguss. I'm going to trust in the fact that I think that Jellicent is going to be able to close out this game for me. So I send in the Gourgeist and I click no shield. I'm going to try for a farm down, my opponent makes another foul play, and I'm forced to put up a shield. I cannot let 60 energy go to waste. In the back, they have their own Jellicent, and the energy that I have stored on Gourgeist is just won me this game. Shadow Ball will be shielded, but I'm so far ahead that I'm able to outpace and make it to a second Shadow Ball. This does not take the one-hit knockout, but the damage is done. Now I can switch my Jellicent into theirs. They throw on 7, but this is not a double up, and the Hex that sneaks through just took the knockout. So Shadow Ball lands, my Jellicent survives, and despite a really rough lead, we take the win. We get up a very nice lead in the next match, Jellicent into Seaking. My opponent safe switches into Amoonguss, and at this point, I am tired of this mushroom. If Amoonguss wants to win the zeros, they have to go for a Grass Knot. So I debated going for a catch here onto the Gourgeist, but decided against it. Because if they went for a foul play, that would obviously go pretty poorly for me. But they went for the Grass Knot, and I have a lot of regrets. I should have just gone for the catch. The catch would have ended up being a very nice play. In comes the Gourgeist, shield comes up as they make the foul play, and my opponent's going to pivot out and send in for Alligator. This is the non-shadow for Alligator, which means they are able to very comfortably survive one Seed Bomb. However, the good news for me is I'm able to make Seed Bomb number 2. My opponent now has 6 Shadow Claws of energy. I'm going to switch into Victreebel and look for the full farm down. I'm going to shield because they can go double Hydro, but if they go for a crunch, which they do, they're only going to make it to one move. So now I get a full farm down. I have a massive amount of energy on Victreebel, and my opponent, all they have is the Seaking and a very low HP Amoonguss. They need a catch, and I'm just never going to throw the move. I keep farming, there's the catch attempt, and they do not get it, and that is going to secure the win. Victreebel is an absolute force of nature in this meta, but maybe being ABA weak to both Astonish and Sucker Punch is not the play, because oh my goodness, I saw so many Astonish users. Hopping into the final match, we pick up a very nice lead Jellicent into Quagsire. My opponent throws a Mud Shot and then safe switches into Tentacruel. Again, I don't really have a clean answer to a Tentacruel safe switch, so I just stay in with the Jellicent and decide to play it out. I know that I do survive a payback here, but I'm going to put up a shield because I want to try and get as much value as possible out of the Jellicent. The fewer shields that are in play, the better it's going to be for my 2 grass types in the bag to pick up a one-hit knockout onto the Quagsire. I will lose charge attack priority here, payback to the Surf. I do know that I will survive the payback though, which is very helpful. I'm anticipating my opponent is always going to be letting the Tentacruel go and going for farm either on the Quagsire or on their yet-to-be-revealed final Pokemon. If it's the Quagsire, I have to stay in because I have a very hard check to Quagsire in Gourgeist. So I send in the Gourgeist, they bank a move, they reveal their final Pokemon in the back is going to be Galarian Weezing, and at this point, this should be a win. I'm just always going to be staying in with the Gourgeist. I'm going to force them to throw energy. If they overheat, they're going to be at -2, and if they throw something that isn't the overheat, then they're going to need multiple charge stacks. They go for the sludge. That is okay by me. I'm just going to let the Gourgeist go and trust in Shadow Victreebel. Shadow Victreebel has been the star of the show so far. My opponent farms up, and they do build up to a potential overheat. I'm definitely respecting it. They full send the overheat, and that should be the game winner. Back in comes the Quagsire. They don't have enough for a Stone Edge. It could be a Mud Bomb. Mud Bomb lands, and that is how glassy Shadow Victreebel is. Mud Bomb almost took the one-hit knockout, but it just did not. Victreebel exits with the back-to-back Leaf Blades, one-shotting the Quagsire, and that's going to be game over as Leaf Blade KOs Galarian Weezing, and that's a good game. All in all, I had a ton of fun getting to run this team. I believe on stream I went 13 wins and 7 losses with it. And I felt like the only negative set that I had was a 1-4 set where I kind of had some growing pains with the team, trying to figure out how I wanted to play certain matchups like the Shadow Victreebel lead. Whereas initially, I had thought about trying to catch a Leaf Blade onto Gourgeist, and that didn't end up working particularly well. But once I kind of figured out the play patterns for the team of just trying to play the zeros with Jellicent a lot of the time to set up that Victreebel and Gourgeist in the back to sweep, then I feel like the team really ended up clicking. Potentially, if I tried to adjust the team, I think I might end up benching the Gourgeist in favor of something that isn't weak to Astonish, because that felt like it was a bit of a weak spot of this team, because there was a lot of teams that ended up safe switching either a Moongus or a Klefki, and I didn't have a great response. Jellicent can do okay in those matchups, but it's still not doing amazingly, so I always felt like I was playing from behind against those particular team comps. But the team still ended up going very, very positive overall, and Victreebel was just disgusting in so many games. But I think if I was to run the team back again today, I would probably make that adjustment. I might try something like Tinkaton or Galarian Weezing, just to have slightly better answers in case I ran into those Amoonguss, because man, Amoonguss did prove to be a pretty big issue for the team overall. And as I said, the team did go very positive, but I always like trying to refine and adjust teams to make them as good as they possibly can be. Because when Rise ran this team, it was during the first week of the Spring Cup, which was quite a few weeks ago. So now that time has passed and new Pokemon like Tinkaton have come to the meta, people are adjusting their strategies. So I think this is a very strong day one team for the Spring Cup meta. I'm excited to look to try and adjust it and see how I can best support Shadow Victreebel. Because even as weeks come and weeks go, Shadow Victreebel still to me feels like one of the best Pokemon you can use in this entire meta. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. Thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.